Hello and good evening, my dear viewers. You're welcome to week 2 of our 8th burial bread class. I'm so happy to be here doing this with you again. If you don't know me, my name is Mikaya and I'm your coach for this session. You see, at 8th burial bread class, we don't just teach you how to bake bread, we teach you the science of baking. And last week, we were able to establish and bake a very, very delicious loaf of tangerine milk bread, establishing the fact that you can actually bake bread with the two hands that God has given you and with simple kitchen equipment like your gas cooker or your charcoal stove or your kerosene stove and your simple pots, right? Today we're going to make another bread, and this bread is one of our signature loaves at 8th burial. It is also tangerine milk bread, but this time we're going to be using our sprouted whole grain potato flour, specially formulated by 8th burial. We are going to be debunking a popular myth that a lot of people have, that whole grain bread is boring, whole grain bread must be dry. Today I'm going to show you that whole grain bread can be interesting, soft and delicious. So let's get right into it. For starters, I have my whole grain sprouted protein flour here. It is a special made by 8th burial and it is designed to perfection, specially formulated to give you that delicious whole grain protein bread that we are known for. And then, sorry, this is olive oil. I hope you can see it clearly. So we're going to be making the bread as healthy and as natural as possible. Olive oil is one of the fats that is very, very important for heart health and very, very important for baking bread. I'm going to also explain to you why we choose to sprout our grain later in the class, right? And of course, we have egg. Egg we're going to be using for this recipe works as a softener. It contains lecithin, which is an enzyme that actually helps to hold the flour together and keep things in place. So this recipe calls for egg, and we're not going to skip on it. Here is honey, all natural honey. Now, honey is a sweetener, it's a simple sugar, but it doesn't just sweeten the bread, right? It helps to give the bread that brown and beautiful crust, and also that's a delicious smell that you get in the oven whenever bread is being baked. So it comes from the sweetness. Apart from that, honey helps to feed the yeast because yeast feeds on sugars. We established this in the last class. Yeast feeds on sugars present in either the processed sugar you add to your bread or the sugars present in the flour, right? So honey also serves as food for the yeast. I'm also going to be touching that up a little later, but if you want more explanation, please do well to watch the previous video that we made on last week Sunday. And also, I'm going to be adding date syrup. So I have already blended these dates on a ratio of 2:1. Yesterday, I explained it in detail in the delicious cookie and oats coconut and oat cookie that we made in class yesterday. So I explained how I was able to achieve this consistency. You can feel free to watch the video we made yesterday to get more insight. And then salt. Salt is the star ingredient in this recipe. Whatever you do in baking, I always say it, do not skip on salt, because as small as it might seem, without salt, your baked goods will always taste bland. And especially when you are baking bread, you should never skip on salt, because salt helps hold everything together. Salt helps slow down the yeast reaction, because whenever yeast comes in contact with flour and water, it tends to overreact. But with salt, it helps to and giving the bread that flavor and that delicious aroma and delicious taste that all of us crave for in bread, right? Exactly. And then water. Water is the great binder. Without water, all your ingredients will be hanging loose. It keeps everything in place and helps you to be able to hold it together, giving it that structure that you want. So let's get right into it. So I already have weighed out 500 grams of our protein sprouted flour, and I'm just going to be adding the dry ingredients to this first of all. We don't have so much of dry ingredients around here. Sorry. Let me get my yeast closer. So this is yeast. This is a bread that requires yeast. Yeast is a natural microorganism, and I'm going to be explaining a lot about yeast in detail. Although I touched on it in more detail in the previous class, I'll also be explaining it today for the benefit of those who didn't join us last week. You're very much welcome if this is your first time. This is not your first time, you're welcome again. So I'm going to be measuring all the ingredients because I like measuring out with my scale. But if you do not have a scale, feel free to use a tablespoon or a teaspoon. Any measuring equipment you have, feel free to use it. I'm going to be rounding it up for you so that you can get to as accurate measures as possible. So I'm going to start here with my yeast. For this recipe, we're going to be using 4 grams of yeast. And if you're using your tablespoon measure, that's about half a tablespoon of yeast. So if you're using a scale, it's 4 grams. If you're using a tablespoon, it's half a tablespoon of yeast. So this goes right in. Then salt. I'm going in with 5, also roughly about half a tablespoon as well. So I'm using 5 grams of salt, right? All right, so these are about the dry ingredients I have here. As a rule of thumb, always make sure to weigh in and combine your dry ingredients before you go in with your wet ingredients so that you can have a very well mixed dough. So, big question, why do we sprout the grains we use for our special whole grain bread? You see, the process of sprouting is just like waking the grains up. Just imagine that someone is asleep to wake the person up. That's exactly what sprouting does to grains. Every grain you see has most of its nutrients locked inside. So when you sprout grains, like you're germinating them, allow them to grow, you're waking them up. And when we sprout, what we now do is to dry up the grain because we have to soak them in water first and germinate them and then dry up the grains before we now process them into fine flour. Now that process helps the grain to release the nutrients that are otherwise locked inside, making them healthier for you and making them easier to digest. That is the reason why sprouted grains are healthier, better for your blood sugar levels, and also help with your gut health. They are easier for you to digest. So if you struggle with constipation, if you struggle with indigestion, or you have issues with blood sugar, sprouted grains are healthier for you to eat. And of course, these are sprouted grains are combined in a very controlled recipe that gives a protein bread formula. So we have a lot of proteins in this formula. We have legumes from soybeans, beans, lentils, whole wheat, barley. In fact, it's actually packed grain that we are using for this whole grain bread, right? So we have successfully combined our dry ingredients, and now we're going to go in with the wet ingredients. So back to the scale. So the first wet ingredient I'm going to be putting into the mixture is my egg. So I'm just going to crack it open. Good. And then I have this. Pouring the egg. Can you see what I'm doing here? Like so. Going in with the egg. And then I'm going to be weighing 150 grams of the date syrup. All right. And I'm going in with 50 grams of the honey. Remember that these don't just give sweetness to the bread, they help with the yeast activity. What do I put in what? In what? In the honey. Okay, what did I just pour? The first thing I poured, what I just poured in now is date syrup. Now I'm going in with 50 grams of honey. Right? So I poured it in. So at this point, I'm going to be going in with my water. Now, when you want to add water to bread, even if the recipe calls for a very small amount of water, always add it gently because water can be tricky. Although this is a dough that requires a lot of water because it's whole grain, so it actually tends to absorb more water. But still add it gently. Don't just add all the water because they say put 100 grams, now and pour 100 grams. No, start with 50 and go in slowly until you get the recipe calls for about 120 grams of water. So I'm going to weigh it out, but I'm not going to add all inside at once, right? So let's go with this. So so and I have what I want, 120 grams, but as I said, I'm not going to pour all in at once. And let me weigh out the oil before I get to work because oil usually comes in about when I'm almost done kneading. So I'm going in with 40 grams of oil for this recipe. All right, so 40, and there we have it. So let me put everything aside so that we can start working. Before I go further, I forgot to mention that one of the star ingredients of this recipe is tanjung. Let us get to making our tanjung as fast as possible because we should have done that a bit earlier. So to make tanjung, it's just a rule of 1:5. Wherever you have 1 gram of flour, you use 5 grams of water. So I'm going to be using 50 grams of flour to 250 grams of water, or 1 tablespoon of flour, sorry, 3 tablespoons of flour to 15 tablespoons of water. So I'm going in with 50 grams of flour. Yeah, to 250 grams of water. And I'm going to give this a good steam, right? Okay. All right. Let me first whisk it and make it combine smoothly. Make sure it gives a smooth paste. Let me show you what I have here. So you have to mix it until it's smooth. While making this tanjong is an ancient East Asian recipe or paste. It's actually good for gelatinizing doughs and helping the dough to have more starch. So the simple principle behind tanjong is that you boil this paste and make it into a smooth paste and make it thick. Then you add this simply to your bread. Now let me just steam this up quickly before we continue. While it's on fire, you want to give it a good stir. Let me show you what I'm doing so you can have a good look at it. Until it thickens. And you can actually keep this because I'm not going to be using all of this for this recipe. So when you do your tanjong, you can always keep it and use it over and over again. But I just like to make it, and use. So you stir and stir. It is when it becomes thickened that it releases the starch that you need. Tanjong helps to keep your whole grain bread softer. So when we make whole grain bread at burial, we always like to add tanjong to it to make it softer and easier to manage. Right? It stays. It keeps fresh for a longer time. Unlike breads that do not contain tanjong in them. So do not skip on this process. So just keep whisking so that there will be no lumps formed inside. Almost there. It's already thickening up. We are almost where we want to be. I think everything is well combined now. It's about to boil up. So let me see who is actually following along. Let me ask a question at this point. What does sprouting do to grains? What does sprouting do to grains? Why is this process of sprouting important? But what does it do? First of all, let's establish that. Let me see who is paying attention in. Who can answer that question? All right. Our attention is. I think I have a commenter. All right. Let's take a look. It says it unlocks the nutrients. Beautiful. So Tangjung helps unlock the nutrients stored up in the grains. I'm sorry, I said Tangjung. Sprouting. Sprouting helps unlock the nutrients present in the grains, right? So that's a very, very, very important step that we follow with our sprouted grains. All right. Now I'm going to be going in with just 50 grams of this roux that I've made. Let me wait here. 50 grams of the roux is all I need for this recipe. All right. This is what the roux looks like, right? This is what it has formed the paste. You can see how it's already thick. So this is what we're going to be using for this recipe. Let me just cool it down with half of the water I need for the bread. One a little. So I'm going to combine this bread with my hands slowly. And after I'm done, I'm going to do something that is, I'm going to observe a very, very important protocol in hand bread kneading. It's called the step of autolysis. When you're making bread with your hands, you want to give the bread that rest that it needs. And it's called an autolyzing, as I said, or autolyzing. So that process helps the flour to break down. The water at that point breaks down the flour, more like digests the flour, if you like. So it's very, very important not to skip that part. I'm going in with the tangent at this point. Yep, it's all warm and ready for the bread. So this is what we have here. And you see the color of this. You see, healthy bread does not have to be boring. Healthy bread is delicious and interesting. Yes, very, very delicious and interesting, I must add. Do not think that healthy bread is boring. So when everything comes together nicely, you can already see it sticking to my hands in a very, very thick paste. That is what Tanjung does. So you see, at 8th Berry, we're teaching you the science behind baking, not just recipe. We show you why you are doing what you are doing and understanding what all the ingredients you're putting in bread do. So I'm going in with the oil now gently, just to allow them combine. Yeah, I think at this point I should add the remaining part of the water. So I have been able to gauge that I need all the water that the recipe calls for. So I'm going to pour all of them inside now. Good. That's it. Now I continue to knead in my hands. Not knead, just like a mix, more or less. I'm not putting all the oil at this point. I want the bread to auto, or the dough to autolyze. So now I'm going to just do this and let it rest for a bit before we now start the proper process of kneading. So as I said earlier, this process is very, very, very important. If you don't have sprouted grain flour, you can use whatever. Remember that last week I told you that if you're using refined flour, please always opt for bread flour, because bread flour is designed especially, particularly for bread. You know, oh, thank you so much for paying attention. I'm sorry you're paying attention. All right. So I'm going to show you what the already kneaded dough looks like. This is what you should have after kneading the dough. Now, the process of kneading is a very gentle and intentional process. Remember, I said that wheat flour contains gluten. Now, think about making a crochet. If you are crocheting, you're trying to build structure. So when you are kneading, you're trying to build structure. What really happens when your dough is being kneaded is that the gluten structure begins to form. Without this gluten structure forming, your bread will not be able to trap gas. Where does this gas come from? This gas comes from yeast. You know, we added yeast into the bread. Now, yeast is a living microorganism that feeds on sugars present in the dough. As soon as yeast is eating, it will eat and eat and eat and start to belch, right? So when it feeds, it starts to release gases in form of carbon dioxide gases. Now, those gases need to be trapped. If your gluten structure is not well formed, the gases are going to escape. That is the reason why bread collapses when you make them, if the gluten structure is not well formed. So now this is a properly kneaded dough because it has rested to a point and you can see how it's already looking smooth. The yeah, that is saying the next ingredient is rolling the dough. Yeah, the next step is kneading, but after the bread has autolyzed, right? You have to allow rest for a period of like 10 minutes before you now start to knead the dough. So this is already a dough that has been kneaded, and I just showed you, for like an example sake. Please. I know you're thinking, what is she doing? What is she doing? What is she doing? I'm checking something. I have a little surprise for you. All right, good. So so that's about it. So now our bread has autolyzed. We're going to do something at this point. Now let me keep this one to rest. I've been able to do a little demo to show you what the bread should look like after it has been kneaded. Now let us start kneading the dough that we have set aside to rest. You see that it has become much more pliable. You won't expect bread that is made with whole grain to be as soft and fluffy as bread made with refined flour. That is not realistic. But then the truth remains that it will actually give you the results you want if you handle it with care. So we are getting right into this. It's just a process of pushing and folding gently and with intention. Always think about good things when you are kneading bread. Don't have bad memories, because if you think about someone that was making you angry when you are kneading bread, you can end up destroying the bread. So always have good memories and think about good stuff. It really helps when you are making bread, right? So this is about it. So now we are kneading, pushing and folding, pushing and folding, pushing and folding, pushing and folding. So are we doing the soup or anything? And which soup are you talking about, Kudirat? All right. Okay. Okay, what I was checking in the oven. Ah, I see your eyes are sharp. It's not a soup. It's not a soup. It's not a soup. It's a surprise. It's a surprise I have for you. Yeah, Kudirat, I love your engagement. All right. So it's just more or less pushing and folding, right? And then, okay, all right. So a push and fold, and you can see that I'm adding the oil gradually. One mistake that beginners often make when making bread by hand is by being tempted, or it is being tempted to add lots of flour when the bread becomes sticky. Please don't do that. Instead, go in with your oil gradually. Or bear with the stickiness, because the bread can easily turn out to be very dry. if you add too much flour, make sure that you are able to gently and with intention. It will all come together. It will all come together. Don't you worry about anything. You just keep on doing what you're doing. So let me still check the surprise I said I have for you. All right. Whoa. It looks like my surprise is almost ready. I'm about to unfold my surprise, but let me continue with the kneading. So apart from this session, every single day we have live baking sessions. Sundays are dedicated for long bread making tutorials, but every other day by 7 p.m. and only on Wednesdays by you can always catch us live on this channel where we'll be teaching you how to bake different delicious healthy recipes and snacks that you may have never thought about. So tell a friend to tell a friend. Keep a date with us every day by 7 p.m. and I promise you will not regret it. Yeah, a little dough. Where is the dough? On the table. Yeah, you know it's going to be sticky at this point. So as it is becoming sticky, it shows that everything is coming together already. This is the point where you can be tempted to add a little flour, but try not to. Just put up with the stickiness. Everything will come together. Everything will come together. So now you can carry a scraper if you have one. If you don't have one, just use a knife. Yeah, and raise it up like so. See, everything comes together nicely, and then keep on with the work. Yeah, you can see the color of this bread. It's brown. It's giving healthy deliciousness. You know, that's exactly what you want to have on this loaf of bread. I think my surprise is ready. I'm going to be explaining something shortly because at this point I can't keep my surprise longer and a second period of rest. It has to go through a lot of rest so that the gluten will form naturally while we unlock our surprise. All right. So at this point, setting this aside, all right, good, good, good. All right, this is about it. And then we cover it up to rest further. Okay, the time has come for me to show you exactly what we're cooking. So at the end of the day, this is exactly what you expect to have. This is a loaf of bread we're baking. This is a loaf of our Tanjung whole grain protein loaf. You can see the crust of this bread formed really nicely. Now let me turn it into a cooling rack for you to see. One mistake that beginners usually make sometimes is leaving the bread in the pan for too long before turning it out. You always want to make sure that you turn your bread You remove your bread from the pan after you bake it. Why? Because of the heat. If you do not remove your bread from the pan after you bake it, it begins to sweat because of steam. So when it sweats, it will build up steam around it and become soft and soggy. So this is what our, oops, I forgot that it was hot. So this is what our loaf looks like. At the end of all your hard work, this is a beautiful result you're going to get. This is going to be very, 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 very delicious. I can't wait to taste it. So let me get a knife and show you exactly what the inside of this loaf looks like. Just hold on. So this is the part I love the most. Ooh, still feels hot though, but I can't resist it. So there's a smell that comes from bread when it's baked. So that whenever you are living close to a bakery, you used to know when bread has done. Do you know what that smell is called? Do you know what causes that smell? It's called Maillard reaction. It's between the sugars and the flour and the yeast in the bread when it's baking. Now, can you see this? Can you see this? This whole grain bread, made with intention, made with our tangerine starch. That is the reason why you can see how the bread is feeling soft. Very, very delicious and very, very healthy. I'm going to be tasting it and on your behalf. On your behalf. Yeah. So that I can just tell you what it tastes like. Oh, God, oh. See me, oh, as if it's not me, oh. This is nice. It's really good. Really nice. Very, very delicious. So, thank you so much for joining our class today. Will you taste it with something? Haba, this one is taste now. Don't want to eat it. You can actually eat it with zobo, with kono, with tea, especially healthy tea. One of the good things about this protein bread is that it's very, very filling. You don't have to eat so much of it for you to get satisfied, right? Just eat a few slices and you're good to go. At 8th Barrel, we make very, very delicious protein bread that we actually make for selling too. But for today, I'm just teaching you how to make your own protein bread at home, especially if you have the protein flour. If you want to learn how to make protein flour, don't you worry. Let me know in the comment section and I'll teach you how to make your own sprouted grain flour from scratch. For now, it's bye. I hope to see you tomorrow by 7 p.m. Thank you so much for joining us today. See you on the next one. Have a nice evening.